What's the craziest thing you've seen somebody do at the workplace? When I was 14, I worked at a floral business who basically hired anyone. My duty for that day was to stand in one of the greenhouses and shove seeds into little soil pots all day. I was partnered up with this guy, probably in his early 20s. Typical burnout with a 24/7 confused look who would spend all day telling everyone about how much of a badass he is. My boss was freaking insane. He had an incredibly short temper. His typical reaction to someone doing something wrong would be to throw his hat, then break things, including but not limited to plants, chairs, a tow motor once, etc. Anyway, apparently the kid I was working with screwed something up and the boss had just noticed it. He comes storming into the greenhouse red in the face. He starts yelling at the kid for something he had previously done, and then begins kicking crap over and eventually telling him to "Get the heck out and don't come back, you're fired!" Instead of this kid walking out with his head down, he runs up to my boss, rips his shirt off and yells, "If I can do 100 push-ups in 1 minute, I keep my job." He wasn't asking, he was telling. He drops down and begins doing the fastest push-ups I've ever witnessed. He mumbled his way to 100, put his shirt back on, walked back to the bench, and continued planting seeds like nothing ever happened. Boss never said another word. You know what? I respect the commitment and the confidence. Making up your own terms for not getting fired is an insanely baller move. I don't know what was going through his head, but it worked out. I think he just stun-locked the boss is what happened. Which, hey, is a valid negotiating tactic. Next story. A guy I used to work with at a Sonic drive-in once hopped out the drive-thru window while wearing skates to chase down a woman who'd left her credit card. My coworker didn't quite get to her before she got out of the lot, but he persevered and caught up with her at the light about a quarter-mile down the road. I was thoroughly impressed. Next story. Worked as a tech support front desk with an ISP. A client told me that any email he sent was always returned to him. I asked him if he knew the mailer daemon error message. He said he didn't know what I was talking about and proceeded to pull out 2 or 3 envelopes with an email address written on them, completed with a stamp. Facepalm. Next story. I was a waiter in a relatively upscale restaurant in town. One night we had a 25-person party for dinner in the front of the dining area. A fellow waiter was carrying water out for them, and being the kind of guy who hated multiple trips, had crowded all 25 glasses onto one tray. I was watching from the back when I saw the first wobble. Anyone who's worked in the restaurant biz knows that first wobble when carrying something heavy needs immediate attention before it becomes a, oh god, the second wobble. By this time, the world was moving in slow motion, and I felt rooted to the spot as I saw the tray start to seesaw back and forth. My friend looked over his shoulder at me, aghast and helpless. I could do nothing for him, but then I saw a look creep into his eyes. Without hesitation, he turned back and in one smooth motion hurled the entire tray of water glasses to one side. The cacophony of shattering glass and rushing water caused a sudden silence to sweep through the restaurant, and without missing a beat, my friend turned to the 25-person party, stunned and wide-eyed at his sudden violent action, and said, "Those waters were bad. Allow me to get you new ones." And then he turned and walked back to pour more without a single crap given. He and I cleaned up the mess while the order was being filled. I wasn't even mad. Next story. I was operation duty officer for an airline in Canada. Our office was on the 2nd floor of a hangar with planes and stuff. I had to supervise flight dispatchers. In those days, printers were not really reliable, and one of the dispatchers seemed to be very unlucky with them. He was trying to print a flight plan with a weather forecast, but every time the paper would jam. After a certain amount of time, he had to redo the whole flight plan because it had expired. After the 3rd time of redoing his flight plan, when the paper jammed in the printer again, he just took the printer and threw it out the window. It flew by the wing of an ATR-42 and crash-landed next to the landing gear. Everyone in the office went livid. I had to leave because I couldn't hold my laughter in. Next story. I'm a sonar technician in the US Navy. A good portion of my watch standing consists of staring at a radar-like screen. I was standing a late-night watch one night when in walks my workplace supervisor. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Soup. So, Soup walks in and says, "You bored?" And I say like a raggedy mother effer. Soup proceeds to walk over to the WQC2, which is for all intents and purposes an underwater megaphone. You speak into it just like a CB radio and it projects your voice into the water. Soup unhooks the mic and sets it on one of the chairs. He turns his back to the chair and drops his coveralls to his ankles, exposing his bare butt. He then reaches behind him, clicks on the mic, and lets one rip. This thing was loud. As soon as I got done laughing over the sight of what he did, he points to my sonogram. And I'll be damned. Amidst all the white noise and regular garbage we pick up orally, his fart hung there proudly and prominently displayed as a bright green fuzz. Then, Soup takes control of my console. He selects the fart and sends the information, sound recording and all, to the team on the bridge. They had no idea what it was. We told him it was a whale fart. Best watch ever. Next story. One of my first jobs was at an amusement park, and if you were a good employee, showed up on time and sober, you would get advanced pretty quickly. Soon I was in charge of giving people breaks and training new employees, which was a pretty sweet job. You basically got to do what you wanted as long as everyone got their break on time, and paid slightly more. One day I go to give a break to the new guy. He smiles and takes his bag full of change, containing 1 to 2 grand in ones, fives, tens, and 20s this late in the day, and runs off to presumably lock it in the little safes they give us to hold the money. The guy never came back. Security and management come by and they ask me a bunch of questions about him, and eventually they realize he gave completely fake information and he worked one day so he could steal a couple of $1,000s. They never found the guy. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't do this. But on the other hand, that's pretty funny, man. But you shouldn't do it. But it's pretty funny. If you're gonna steal a couple $1,000s, getting a job just to run away with the change, I don't know, that's some dedication. Or I guess not, because you left after day one. It's something. Next story. I worked at a monkey lab, and Mark, the night security guard, would take the security truck, pick up some booze, drive 80 miles to San Francisco, pick up an escort, drive the 80 miles back to his trailer, drink more, get laid, drive the escort back to San Francisco, and then would return to work still drunk right before the morning crew showed up, on a fairly regular basis. Next story. I worked at a med school and I was in a meeting full of PhDs and MDs. Well, the meeting got a little heated and one of the doctors who was arguing climbed up on the table and started tap dancing while screaming, "You can't fire me, I've been here forever. I can say what I want." It was hilarious. Edit. I guess I should clarify that in general he's great. Nice guy, loves the students, and will do whatever he can to help them be successful. But if you give him an opening, i.e. do or say something stupid that makes you seem like a total idiot, he is on that crap like white on rice. He has a low tolerance for bullcrap, and the majority of his antics are directed at his colleagues who get caught up in being medical doctors or scientists, and in the process, lose sight of what their job is, which is helping people, students, etc. And no, he didn't get fired. A beautiful thing called tenure. I make sure to sit next to him at every meeting. It's guaranteed entertainment. He gives a little to no craps. Next story. My uncle, who is no longer my uncle on account of divorce, had a real short temper. We were electricians finishing up a large, very expensive medical building. My uncle was the foreman of this particular job. Before finishing a project, it's customary to do a walk around with the owner/tenant and whatnot. At one point, the owner asked that we move an electrical outlet to the other side of the wall. My uncle, in all his short-tempered glory, kicked the outlet right through the wall, looked at the owner with a completely straight face and said, "Anything else I can do for you?" It was awesome. He was fired. Then he got divorced. He's no longer my uncle, just my friend now. We go shooting all the time. I figure if he's gonna snap again, I want him on my side. Next story. Worked at an AT&T call center, graveyard shift. We had TVs up around the call center to watch the news/old movies when the calls got slow. Suddenly, the channel change came up, which is normal when Cinemax hits its late night shows. Instead of the news, though, it went to the adult content section. At this point, the call center staff is chanting, "Adult content, adult content, adult content," and the menu is selected. Then the "Will you accept charges" menu comes up. Again, this is on all of the TVs in the call center. We start chanting, "Yes, yes, yes!" Lo and behold, the yes is clicked, and there's a woman spread eagle doing unspeakable things to herself. We start laughing and see two supervisors at full tilt towards the security office. Apparently, the security didn't know the TV he had in his office controlled the entire building. Next story. This was about 8 years back when I was in high school. I was working at McDonald's and some guy came to the drive-thru and ordered a filet-o-fish. We just ran out of fillets that were already prepared, so we had to drop a new batch into the fryers. The standard procedure for this is to wait until they're done, take them out and sprinkle sprinkle some salt on them before they go inside the buns. But a new worker was doing that, and he accidentally spilled the entire batch of salt on the fillets. He quickly tried to brush it off, but the hot oil melted a large amount. We didn't want to make the guy wait even longer, so we just served it to him anyway, and off he went. 10 to 15 minutes later, he comes back and starts screaming over the drive-thru mic about how salty his sandwich was. One of the workers went to talk to him through the window, and the guy reached out from his car, grabbed the worker by the collar, and started punching him in the face repeatedly. My manager ran in and pulled the worker back, and the guy took off. It was so weird. TLDR, angry customer at McDonald's punches worker repeatedly in the face over salty Filet-O-Fish. Edit. I cannot believe I forgot about this little gem, but I have another. A year or two prior to the incident, I was working at another restaurant as a busboy, cleaning tables and being awesome. The restaurant had a bar/lounge area as well, and it got pretty busy there during the nights. But one particular night, this older lady comes in by herself and sits at the bar. She orders drinks and just keeps to herself. She then starts complaining about how her bar stool is uncomfortable and requests a new seat. The bartender goes and grabs her another one, but that isn't satisfactory either. She goes through about 3 different seats, and eventually the owner comes out and offers her his office chair. Now this thing was an $800 chair. I remember because the bartender kept on repeating it, and my owner loved it. She finds this one to be good and goes back to her quiet drinking. I'm in the kitchen at this point, and suddenly I hear one of the cooks yelling, "Grab the mop!" I rush over to see what happened, and the old lady had soiled herself on the seat. Both numbers. It smelled so bad. People rushed out of the restaurant, and the owner almost shed tears. Needless to say, it was a bad scene, man. The chair was thrown out, and the lady had to be taken out by medics as it was clear that she wasn't all there. So gross. Next story. We had a guy in an office of 40 people who was a little bit OCD. He would circle the entire room full of cubicles. It's just one big open floor about 3 or 4 times, and then go into the men's restroom. If you entered the restroom while he was in there, you would see 2 bare feet on one of those paper toilet covers. His pants and shirt would be hung over the stall while he sat and crapped. He would also talk to his brother about sports on the phone. "Do you think Green Bay has a chance?" And then plop. It happened about once a week for the 3 years that I worked there. Eventually, we all learned not to go into the restroom for those 40 minutes. TLDR, this guy at work would poop naked and talk on the cell phone for 40 minutes at a time. Next story. While interviewing for my first job, I was with 2 other candidates. We were to be interviewed by separate managers. I saw the first candidate assigned to an empty manager's office, who then promptly sat down and lit up a cigarette. He didn't get the job. I still have no idea why this guy thought it would be a good idea to do this in an interview in a non-smoking office. Next story. I was a low-level maintenance guy at a big tech company. I did a good job, mostly just cleaning up the place, but my bosses had it in for me. They had this new satellite prototype they were working on. One day while cleaning it, they sealed it up and launched it. Their plan was to send me cheesy movies, the worst they could find, and force me to watch them. They were trying to drive me insane with the loneliness, but I outsmarted them. I was able to build crude robots by cannibalizing my own ship. They were a blessing, but I could no longer control when the movies started and stopped. Eventually, they replaced me with some guy named Mike. I heard later that one of my bosses was replaced by a woman. I still follow the other boss on Twitter. This absolutely sounds like a reference to something, right? Because it makes no sense to me otherwise. I don't really know what's going on here. If you know what this is, please tell me, because I'm so lost. Next story. I was working in a large warehouse-style supermarket and had the job of showing a teenager to the back office to fill out a job application. After 30 minutes, he had finished and exited the office into our back storage warehouse. A forklift was in the middle of the floor. Seeing this, he shouted, not sure to who, no one was really that close, "Oh, sweet, a forklift! You never said I get one of these!" I stood aghast as he jumped right into the seat, cranked the wheel, floored it, and sent it into a Tasmanian devil-style spin. I could hear him maniacally laughing for a good 10 seconds, but I was helpless to do anything lest I get forked. The spin ended abruptly when one of the fork tines caught the corner of a pallet of Pepsi cases, knocking nearly a row of them out. We both watched as a tower, maybe 30 feet tall of cases of soda, slowly started tipping towards us. Seeing his life in danger, he decided to quickly back out of there. Although he had great spinning skills, he must have skipped the lesson on reverse. He floored the forklift, which lunged forward into the tower, causing the entire tower of hundreds of cases of soda to collapse in a deafening, carbonated explosion. The fork had a cage on top, so he emerged unharmed, looked at me, I was the only one there, and said, "You never saw anything!" He ran out the front of the store, leaving a trail of sticky brown footprints. Epilogue. Within minutes, the entire staff rushed to the back room to find me standing alone, to my knees in brown foam. No one said a word. While we stood there silently, the doors burst open. The teenager sprinted to the back office, grabbed his paper application, our only means of IDing him, and blew past us on his way out. He was wearing those shoes with wheels on the bottom, and apparently just slid all the way through the checkout and out the front door. I don't know why, but knowing the kid had Heelys just makes sense. If you're gonna spin in a forklift, you probably have wheelies. I don't know how else to explain it. Next story. Working in a cell phone repair office, we had a customer keep complaining that we got fingerprints on her new LCD screen. We wear gloves and take other precautions, so it's impossible for us to leave fingerprints or dust or other particles on the inside of the LCD screen. My lead tech comes out of the office, tells the customer to come to his desk. He pulls up the customer's account, pulls out his notepad, and writes the customer's address down. The customer asks what he's doing. My lead tech tells her that he is writing her address down so he can come to her house and do unmentionable things to her and her family. He then takes the phone out of her hand and throws it against our tech window, shattering the phone and cracking our window. He comes back to the tech office, takes a monitor and throws it against the wall. He grabs his coat and tells the store manager, "I need some time off," and leaves the store. The aftermath? Amazingly, he wasn't fired, as he was in anger management classes. Stupid policy in my opinion. The customer was given a new phone and the glass and monitor was repaired at the tech's expense. Next story. My best friend and I were working in the same place, and one day he decided to quit. Our boss was an equal opportunity hater, and my friend wanted to make sure our boss knew how much everyone despised him. So he borrowed a brush from a female coworker and pulled almost a handful of hair out of it. He walked up to the boss, put the wad of hair on his desk, and stood there for a moment until boss man finally said, "Okay, you got me. What's this?" "I shaved my butt so you can kiss it, mother effer. I quit." The look on the boss's face was priceless. He sat back in his chair, took off his glasses, looked dumbfounded for a few moments and said, "Okay, you can leave." My buddy said, "Nope, you escort me out. I have a few things to get off my chest." He let him know how he felt all the way out to the parking lot. Next story. A few years ago, I was working as a summer intern at a company. The interns were all put in sort of one long row of desks, sort of half cubicles, but we could see all the way down the row. Well, there was this one quite attractive female intern that sat 3 or 4 desks down from me. We said hi a few times, but she worked with a different group, so I didn't know her very well. One day, I got back to my desk, sat down, and happened to glance over there. She was the only other person in the area, and she must have thought she was alone, because she had her hand down the back of her pants and appeared to be scratching or massaging her anus. She was half turned away from me, so she didn't see me looking. She pulled her hand back out, sniffed her middle finger, and then licked it. I guess for some guys it might have been hot, but it pretty much just repulsed me. It grosses me out a bit, but the doing it, sniffing is like whatever territory for me. Licking it? We've lost the plot. We're so past it. I don't know what's going on anymore. That is insane behavior. That would freak me out, man. Next story. At my first job ever, I worked with a druggie. Like, he did ice in the bathroom. Hard drugs. He had worked there for 2 years and never got caught. One day he came up to me after the store closed, this was a grocery store, and asked if I could cover the last hour of his shift since he covered an hour for me earlier this week. I said sure, and he was so excited that he took a bottle of Windex off the shelf and took a drink of it. True story. Next story. Not really that crazy, but I'm a PC tech and we have rules about not moving computers. I was walking down a hallway and a teacher holding a computer came around a corner in the hall I was walking in. She immediately sees me and does a heel turn with the computer in her hands and runs back to where she got it. I didn't see her run, but when I came around the corner, she was nowhere to be seen. Next story. Working at a UK electricity company office a decade ago. Needless to say, it's a very laddish environment. This big lad comes back from the toilet and his mate shouts across across the office at him. "You've just been for a wank." Big lad flaps his privates out in the middle of the office and replies, "It would have a sticky end if I had." Mixed gender office, of course. There were women there. Next story. I work at a printing company. We often print on foil paper. That's aluminum foil laminated to regular paper. On the press, the rolls spin pretty fast and are up to 5 feet in diameter. They're essentially massive 1,500-pound capacitors. One guy stands there holding his hand to the roll as it spins and waits for an unsuspecting passerby. When the victim walks by, he reaches out to them and shoots a thick, crackling arc of static electricity at them up to a foot away. He literally has a bright lightning bolt shooting from his fingertips. Next story. I used to work at an electrical contracting company in the DC area. Our company had engineers and electricians working side by side. The engineers, college educated, were the project managers. The electricians, high school educated, did the install. Needless to say, there was a lot of tension between the two camps. Anyway, I worked on site at one of our government jobs. The project manager, PM, was kind of a lazy bum and wasn't liked by any of the electricians. So one day during the PM's 2-week vacation, the head foreman gets some drywall guys to come in and remove his office door, drywall over it, and install a 2-foot by 2-foot metal access panel to his office. They did the trim and painted over it all, so it just looked like it had always been that way. The PM returns from his vacation, and he is livid. He didn't talk to anyone else in the office for almost a week. He cried all the way up to the upper management and demanded the foreman get punished, but nothing ever happened. Everyone back at corporate thought it was funny as hell. Best part of it was he even had the alteration put into the blueprint/CAD drawings of our office area, so even on the blueprint, you could see where it designated a 2x2 access panel to his 15 by 15 office space. Foremen are awesome. Next story. I saw my buddy get crap face wasted on vodka while working at Subway. He trashed the place. I was amazed at his genuine drunken distaste for the store. We had to hide his butt when a cop came in the store. Afterwards, he drove to a friend's house and asked everyone repeatedly to punch him in the face. We obliged. We're great friends. It was awesome. Next story. My friend Doug came into work for his first day. Ed, another friend and coworker, said it's okay to drink booze during lunch. They go out and get hammered. After 3 pitchers, they started drinking for real. Doug finishes a 5th of tequila by himself and neither come back to work. Ed showed up the next day, but Doug never bothered. Doug, rest in peace. One of my favorite junkies in the world. He cured that by trying to swallow a chicken breast and choked himself out for the long run. Next story. I didn't see it, but I used to work in the children's ward at the state hospital for the mentally ill. The adult ward was short-staffed and it was my turn to go, but for some reason I ended up flipping a coin for it with another employee. He lost the toss and went in my place. While he was standing around keeping watch on the patients, a staff member ran out of the bathroom and yelled at him to get in there while he ran for help. He walked into the bathroom and immediately noticed blood coming out from under one of the stalls. He opened the door to a mentally challenged guy with his belly split open, playing with his guts. Apparently, the guy had recently had surgery, and while his attendant wasn't watching, split himself back open and started playing with his own guts. All he could do was try to get the guy to stop until the nurse could get there and medicate him. Edit. At the time that this happened, I would have loved experiencing this. My friend knew it too and totally flaunted it. After that, I never missed a chance to go to another ward, unless something else pretty wild was already going on at my regular unit. I did get to see a woman miscarriage while working in the medical ward. She was pregnant and apparently was constantly claiming she was having pain so she could get more meds and attention or something. She was in a wheelchair and was cursing and yelling at the nurses that she was in pain. Since she pretty much always pulled stuff like this, they ignored her. I was sitting with the self-harming, mentally challenged guy who had AIDS, and just happened to look out the door to see what all the noise was about, when I see a long trail of blood that led to the woman in a wheelchair cussing out the nurses trying to finally help her. Next story. This happened before I started working, but an ex-employee at my retail job was working at the cash. A client put down her items and her drink on the counter. The employee then said that she hadn't tried that drink yet from Starbucks or wherever it was from and picked it up, put the straw in her mouth, and drank some. All the other employees were stunned as well. My boss had to do a payout to give the girl some money to buy a new drink. I can't imagine the lack of social awareness. Thinking it's just totally fine to be like, oh, I haven't tried that, and just trying a stranger's drink. A client's, no less. That is a random person who is paying you. Next story. Used to work in a deli with a remote order station in front of the counter. People can put in their order into the machine and come back later for their stuff. The workers hated that thing, since all it did was just add to our workload, especially when things were crazy at the counter. One especially busy Sunday, one of the dudes just lost it. He marched to the machine and punched it so hard it fell over, took off his apron and marched out the store. I think he got canned soon after. Also, when I left the job at the end of the summer, one of the guys there threatened to kill me if I ever came back again, which I did the next summer because I couldn't find anything better. True story. Next story. It seems like maybe this question is geared more toward office workplaces, but I worked at a sketchy pool hall for a year and saw some pretty wacky things. I saw a guy getting choked out, drug deals going down, a trunk full of knockoff designer purses, countless arrests, a woman passed out with her head on the table, a dude dressed like Alf, someone trying to smoke a cigarette while sitting right in front of me at the bar, smoking is banned, a guy got punched right in front of my face, gambling, escort work, my coworker making out with 2 women at the end of the bar while we were working, drugs in the tip jar, and heard, didn't witness, a dude smashing a toilet in the men's bathroom, which resulted in flooding and ceramic shards everywhere, among other things. Next story. Back in my days of working at Lowe's, I had an especially lazy employee that was always searching for inventive ways to sleep during his hours. After hiding behind plants or aisle caps and lumber for a few weeks, he kicked things up a notch by opening the door displays and sleeping on the inside of the aisle. After reviewing some video footage from the HR office, we discovered his sleeping nook, which was furnished with a number of pillows, blankets, assorted electronic devices, and a battery-powered lamp. He was fired soon after, but it was the most impressive display of workplace ingenuity I'd witnessed being put towards sleep at that time. Next story. After hiring me on for about 2 months, my company decided to hire another recent college grad/intern. They picked a guy who was really well qualified based on his education. Turns out he was a total space cadet. I struggled to get this guy to learn the ins and outs of the job. He just couldn't get it, couldn't figure out the programs or make sense of the plans. He was even terrible at making phone calls. One morning, one of the higher-ups asked him to make coffee. I came into the office and was greeted by the smell of coffee, soon realizing it was all over everything. He didn't use a filter and the grounds had clogged up the pot, causing it to overflow over the counter, into the drawers, and next to the refrigerator. It took me an hour to clean the mess up with the help of one of the AAs. After it gets cleaned up, I make a pot of coffee with a filter. Afterwards, I grab a cup and head to my office. He waltzes in and says, "You're a little late today. Oh, how's the coffee?" I replied, "I hope you don't mean the coffee that I just spent the last hour sopping up because somebody forgot to put in a filter." He apologized profusely and left the company a few weeks later. He wasn't a good fit for the job anyway. Next story. I worked with a guy that had gotten pretty heavy into drugs. I'm not sure what he was doing, but given the area I lived in, I assume he was at least on ice. His sinuses were all screwed up and he always had a runny nose. This comes in later. Anyway, he was doing this crap and most likely staying up all night because he would come to work, usually at least 20 minutes late, and pass out within about 10 minutes of sitting at his desk. In spite of repeatedly being woken up by me and the management, to which he would always deny sleeping, he would end up sleeping most of the day. Anyway, one day after lunch, he passed out again, of course, and I was busy and didn't feel like getting a manager or waking him up, so I just let him sleep for a while. When I stopped what I was doing and looked at him, he was pushed back from his desk, slumped over in his chair, and had a line of snot from his nose to his knee, down his leg, and collecting in a nice puddle on the floor. I was completely disgusted and yelled his name. He woke up, wiped his face off with his bare hand, and snorted whatever was still in his nose back up into his head and looked at me. "Oh, what's going on?" He finally ended up getting fired a few weeks later. Next story. Someone took a crap in a wastebasket. The owner of the small.com found it and proceeded to angrily carry the bucket around and ask each employee, "Did you take a smash in this waste bucket?" while holding it in front of our faces. Of course, everyone denied it. I later heard that he very nearly fired every single employee and started over, but obviously thought better of it. Best day at work ever. Next story. Back in my stripping days, I've seen a very drunken stag strip off completely naked and then proceed to dance around the pole before getting chased, still completely naked, flaccid dong dangling by the doorman around the bar, and eventually getting chucked out of the premises. I also used to wax their chest hairs and set their butts on fire with sambuca in the name of entertainment. Made a good dollar, that did. Next story. Several years ago, I worked at Best Buy. There was this kid, Jeremy, who played a lot lot of ridiculous games to pass the time. One particular game was Ninja. The idea of Ninja is that one person closes their eyes and counts down from 10 at a moderate pace. The other people have to scatter and hide from sight before the person opens their eyes. The night before, there was a party, and Jeremy was a little sluggish that day. Panicking quickly, he turned around, saw a cement pillar, and started climbing impressively to the top of it. A few seconds go by, and we hear, "Jeremy! Office! Now!" Turns out that being on a pillar, hiding from one person, makes you completely visible to the shift manager. So Jeremy goes into the office and comes back laughing with a write-up sheet that said, "Jeremy will not play Ninja on company time ever again." Pretty sure he framed it. At the same Best Buy, there was also this kid Eddie. If you worked with him, you could find him wandering around the media section mumbling and talking to himself. Customers would avoid him. Hell, even managers would be wary of talking to him. One day we're having a store meeting and it hadn't started yet. Eddie starts talking to us, but he's seeming normal. So I, being the jerk I am, go, "Hey Eddie, are you on some new medication or something?" No, why?" "Well, you're acting all normal and not talking to yourself." "Oh, I just do that so I can work without any annoying customers asking me questions all day." Freaking brilliant. Next story. When I worked for a mortgage bank about 7 years ago, I used to regularly see guys blowing lines in the bathroom all day long and or juicing up. I talked to the president of the bank at the time, to which he just shrugged his shoulders, not caring as long as they were selling loans. I also used to regularly see shady Guido types forging loan documents like asset verifications, faked W-2 forms, and borrower's authorizations in order to push a loan going through. Freaking disgusting. Glad I jumped off the burning ship 6 years ago, right before the subprime mortgage industry blew up. Next story. I am that guy at nearly any workplace I enter. I've been written up for telling another employee, a fellow male, that he did his job, especially sexy, in my best Carl Childers. Fired from Domino's for taking a 2-hour break at a strip club. Fired from a landscaping company for driving a tractor in tight circles for 10 minutes while smoking a joint. Fired from an adult content store for having fights with the fake dongs. OP, don't take this the wrong way, but it sounds like every single one of these you deserved. If you're self-aware about it, I guess it's fine. But if you're wondering why you've been fired and then say this stuff, I don't know how to help you, man. Next story. I work at a restaurant where we also have a lunch buffet during weekdays. One of our employees is a first responder and she's also in the National Guard. She witnessed an old man at the buffet crash to the floor grabbing his chest. Superstar employee proceeds to perform CPR and dude pukes in her mouth. She spits it out on the floor next to him, pukes, and continues with CPR. As all of this is happening, people are walking around them to get more food from the buffet because they had to eat quickly and make it back to work. The gentleman did not make it. Next story. First week at my last internship, I saw one of my coworkers pick up his desk phone and powerbomb it to the ground. It shattered everywhere, as it was a big phone. He stormed off and didn't come back for a few hours. He later denied it and kept saying that it fell off the desk. Also, a coworker in a separate department witnessed a coworker army crawling out of her cubicle through the hallway and onto the elevator. Nobody ever saw her ever again. That place makes people crazy. Next story. There was a guy I worked with at McDonald's a few years back. He came in for a morning shift after being up for a couple of days straight and under the influence of various substances. He spent an hour running around the staff room with no trousers on looking for his polka dot uniform that he swore he put in his bag, and then came into the kitchen pushing himself along the floor apologizing for being late because his boat was screwed and he had to swim to work. He proceeded to try and work, and when the Big Mac buns told him how much of a harlot his mum was, he buggered off. Found him an hour later sleeping on the top shelf of the stockroom with a sign next to him saying, "OP, screw off, please." Next story. I used to work at Culver's when I was in high school. There was a really stupid kid that worked with me. My boss didn't like him at all. My boss was an absolute jerk. He drove a nice car, and he hit that dumb kid with his car in the parking lot, and the kid was so stupid that my boss actually convinced him to pay for the resulting dent in the hood. The kid was fine, but still dumb though. Next story. I have a coworker that's very similar to Vince Masuka from Dexter. He has a thing for escorts and always has to tell everyone about it. For the longest time, everyone at the office thought he was just a lying perv that liked to talk. but we found out at our Christmas party of 2010 that he wasn't kidding. Kathy, the manager of my floor of our building, walked in on him with not one, but two escorts in our employee bathroom. Not to mention he was videotaping it. The most interesting part was that he didn't stop after he was caught. They finished for another 10 to 15 minutes. He was relieved of his duties after we went back to work after New Year's. I think he's seeing a therapist now. Next story. Back in the day where dial-up internet ruled, I worked for a large airline. One of my coworkers would often work late, and apparently he liked to surf adult content. He later explained to me that this was because the airline paid for wired broadband so he could surf at high speed. Anyway, he worked late one night and went about his apparently regular late-night adult content surf. He was especially fond of erotic stories featuring young Asian women. You may be wondering, how do I know this? It was because he printed these stories to take home later, I guess, and in his post-whack days, left them on the printer. So the following morning, the Christianity as a lifestyle lady that sat directly next to the printer got a fun bonus when she went to print something, a thick stack of Asian nubile erotica. To give context to her outrage, this is a woman who would take her breaks to pray. She kept multiple pictures of Jesus at her desk and would wedge Bible verses into conversations. Oddly, this didn't get the gentleman fired. That actually is another story of workplace insanity. Let's call him David. David didn't get fired for his previous adult content printing proclivities. The head of our department promised to David that next time he would be fired. To go along with that, David was now under constant scrutiny. Whenever David left the office for any length of time, the head of department would wander over and start probing David's machine for incriminating evidence. This put a big damper in David's private internet time, at least for a while. 6 months later, the heat had died down quite a bit, and David started right back up again. His desires had apparently shifted, and now nubile Asian women no longer sufficed. His preferences had migrated to photos of barely legal Asians. No doubt he realized how I knew this. Yes, buried several folders deep, David was keeping his digital spank bank on his company-owned computer. If you think this is where the story ends, and David gets the pink slip, you'd be wrong. Our mutual employer's desire to fire him was only equaled by their desperate need for qualified employees. So, David stayed. The head of the department told him that next time he would most certainly be fired. As is often the case with companies, the airline we worked for was owned by an even larger company, a huge, faceless corporation in a monolithic skyscraper thousands of miles away. We rarely interacted with anyone from the parent company. On the occasion that we did, it was made clear that the corporate hierarchy meant that the night janitor for the parent company was more important than the CEO of the airline. Worse yet, the folks working at the parent company knew this, and treated everyone at the airline with a casual disregard that would shock royalty. Another 6 months later, David ended up working with a member of the IT department for the parent company. While they worked together on some connectivity project, the guy from the parent company made it a point to insult David, David's work, and the network it ran on. Everyone at the airline was a knuckle-dragging monkey, and it was an insult to the parent company that the two networks were attached in any way. David took this as a challenge, and went about running a just recently released NTLM password cracker on the parent company's network. To no one's surprise, David was able to harvest a large portion of the parent company's usernames and passwords. The next time those parent company guys gave David any crap, he was going to show them. A few days later, David ended up back on the phone with the same IT guy from the parent company. As expected, he was just as abusive to David as ever. David pulled out his secret weapon. He told the IT guy in intimate detail how easy it was for him to get the parent company's passwords, how their network wasn't any more secure than the airlines. I like to imagine David smugly telling this story, proud of himself for defending his department from some parent company jerk. It was the very same inflated sense of self that made David, when asked, email the details of his password harvesting exploits to the parent company's IT guy. The next day, David, our department head, and the CEO of the airline went into an office. David was unceremoniously crap-canned. The IT guy from the parent company had labeled David as a hacker and went to the head of the parent company to make sure David's career was over. Not satisfied with simply terminating David, the FBI was also called in to look into the hacking, as well as allegations that David was trafficking in child content. That's right, David's cache of barely legal adult content was now the subject of an FBI investigation. His coworkers were compelled to give statements to the feds, and his direct supervisor, when asked about the ages of the women in David's adult content stash, emphatically replied, "With Asian girls, you never can tell." The feds were never able or never interested in building a case against David, and he quietly moved on to other work. If David is reading this, I'd love to hear from him. And for everyone else, if there's anything you can take away from this, just remember, with Asian girls, you never can tell. Next story. I saw a guy levitate. I was coming out of the blue hole, the room where all of us flight deck aircraft handlers, blue shirts, relaxed until we were needed topside. I walked up the catwalk, headed up to the deck, and the guy in front of me left the ground. It was all in slow motion. He seemed to dangle there for a week. In actuality, it was less than a microsecond. He hung there and then lifted up, and then there was a noise and confusion. He had stood in front of an intake of a turning F-14 engine and got sucked into the engine. I was about 30 feet behind him, but it could have been me. With earplugs and a cranial on, it was hard to determine where noise emanated. I assume he didn't know the engine was turning. A plane captain or QA guy saw it and the engine was killed. Luckily, the guy just broke a shoulder and lost some fingers. It could have been fatal. There was blood all over the engine. I was amazed he lived. Oddly enough, the same engine gobbled up somebody else during the cruise. It didn't FOD out with the first guy, and luckily again the second fellow managed to break some bones and get dinged up, but survived. Also saw a guy try and remove a drop tank that was not empty. His leg was underneath the drop tank and it crushed his leg when it fell. Also saw an F-18 launch and immediately plunge into the ocean. Saw Sparrow missiles launch and chase a decoy. Saw Russian bears fly over my ship that didn't respond to us on the radio and had us a little nervous. Saw the Straits of Hormuz and readied for missile attacks that thankfully did not come. Saw oil wells on fire in the Gulf. They looked like swollen sores in an otherwise pitch-black night sky. I have seen lots of craziness. How the hell do you survive getting sucked into an engine? Even for a little bit. I figure those things are essentially just giant grinders if you get caught in them. Like, you're done and dusted. But apparently 2 people survived. Also, this happened to 2 people, so some protocol must be a little funky or no one's following protocol, which is probably more likely. Anyway, that's the last story for today. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or a night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.